Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. You loved our next guest in front of the camera on Actress and, in front of the camera on House and Once Upon a Time. Now you can see her behind the camera in her directorial debut, Sundogs. It's a star-studded, heartfelt story about a young man's quest to find bin Laden. Let's take a look.
The latest video of Osama bin Laden surfaced today, with the Al-Qaeda leader claiming his organization is alive and well, and will continue to target Americans both abroad and on their own soil. Quote, "We must eliminate the cross, the bearer of the cross.
Al-Qaeda's alive and well, Bob.
We will blow you up and finish
They
you
have to
off."
let me help.
End quote.
Ned Chipley, reporting for duty, sir. I put on 15 pounds of muscle mass. I can do 60 push-ups without stopping and 100 if you give me a 30-second break. I can run 6 miles in 42 minutes. And I want to save lives. Excuse me, ma'am? Ma'am? Can you keep a secret?
Part of me wants to know what's going on. Part of me doesn't.
I could drive you because, like, you're gonna need a driver to follow him right.
I think it's sweet, whatever it is. Look good?
Looks good.
No, don't tell people you're a Marine, Ned. You don't want to compromise yourself or this office. The real heroes are the ones looking after their fellow citizens here on the home front.
The home front.
And what I need you to do, Ned, is be vigilant. Can you do that for me? Be vigilant?
Vigilant. Absolutely, sir. More fishy stuff. They bought epoxy glue, some other kind of glue, some fuel, and some paint. We got the receipt. Al-Qaeda is alive and well here in America. Be vigilant. Okay.
I don't know why you let them chase these pipe dreams, Rose.
There are terrorists at the airfield. They're Al-Qaeda, and they plan to strike today.
Al-Qaeda is alive and well here in the United States. Who are you? They call us Sundogs.
Everybody, please welcome Jennifer Morrison. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm gonna start this interview off by selling myself out and say we get a lot of actors and actresses who come on the stage who've directed a project, their first project, and it is my job always to say, it's great. Congratulations,
Right.
you know?
So you're
and often, you know, oftentimes they're good, but oftentimes what I find is that they don't have, they didn't have the time or the money or the wherewithal to create a very specific tone and a very specific look. And one of the things that I was so impressed with your directorial debut was how specific the look was and how committed to the tone you were, which are two things that are actually very hard to do. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you're not lying.
I am not lying.
To me.
Well, to be honest, I wouldn't be that specific if I was lying.
Okay.
I would say, great job, we love it. How did you do it? You know?
Okay.
Good setup, huh? Now you're like...
No, but I mean, to speak to what you're saying, I had an incredible creative team that ultimately, you know, all the greatest directors that I look up to have all said, you know, hire people better than you. And that's what you do. You hire a great cinematographer, a great editor, a great color timer, a great production designer, you know. And all of those people on this project were exceptional, and they all went above and beyond in every way. So that's how we were able to achieve a really cohesive look.
But you can see it right in the beginning of the film with some of the shots that you choose. I mean, the shot that kind of dollies down the cards in the mirror with him working out in the background. They're exquisite shots, and they're also very well planned.
Thanks.
Yeah. But my first question is, this is not an easy movie, an easy story to tell. Right out of the gate as a first-time director. What made you jump at the chance to do this?
You know, honestly, in some ways I think I was a little bit naive, but in a good way. I really responded to the characters. I loved all the characters. I loved Ned, and I really loved the overall message of the idea that we're all looking for our purpose in life, and sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference. And so I really responded to that message, and I somehow just felt like I saw the movie in my mind as I read it, and I saw and felt the tone and the texture of it. And so it just felt to me like it was always going to be the movie that it is. Whereas on the page, to other people, that wasn't necessarily as obvious. So part of it was just that for whatever reason, it grabbed at my heart in that very particular way, and I could see it.
Were you worried at all when you started making this film about the tone and about how you were going to depict this character? I imagine, well, one, either you and Michael worked a lot on how to make sure that in no way you came off like you were making fun of this character,
Right.
but at the same time, maybe he had it already as soon as you started filming. You're like, oh, he's got it. I don't need to do that much here.
Yeah, I was concerned. I was always concerned with the tone, and I was always not worried, but like very, very particularly paying attention to the tone. Obviously, this is a family drama, and there's this particular family in these particular circumstances, but those circumstances all have sensitive subjects, you know, and so I wanted to be sure to honor all of those subjects, and I wanted to be sure to be respectful of all those subjects, and it was tricky, you know, and it was something that sometimes was a nudge left or right in the edit, you know, sometimes like, you know, the biggest difference would be made by 3 extra seconds of someone thinking, or, you know, it was amazing how drastically the energy of the film could shift from the smallest decisions in the edit. And in terms of the way Michael and I work together, I couldn't have had a better partner in this situation.
Great. He's a really great. He's an actor that I've been watching for a while, and I've been like, every time he does something, it's like, oh, this guy's a great actor. Yeah.
There's nothing he can't do. He really is so exceptional, and he's so committed, and he's just so easy to work with. And so we'd had several dinners and talks and conversations, and ultimately we wanted to play with a range on set, because you also never know in the edit what's going to work. You know, you think in the moment something feels right, and then 3 months later you're sitting in the edit and you realize, oh man, that's just not quite big enough, or that's not quite small enough, or that should have been more subtle. So he was really wonderful and generous about giving me a wide range of performance. You know, we'd sort of, he'd kind of push as far as he could possibly push it in terms of size, and I'd be like, okay, if that's an 8, let's dial it to a 3, and he'd be like, got it, you know. So then we'd have a variation of options, so that once I was in the editing room, there were times that the 8 worked, and there was times that the 4 worked, you know.
I was going to ask, did you find that when you were in the editing room, it was always it varied between the 8s and the 3s, or did you find, like, when you were in the editing room, oh, the story that we're telling is a 3, and mainly we'll stick to that?
I think it was more that it was always the most genuine take. It was always the most sincere. Right. I think that the key to Ned, and I think Michael found this really early on, was how honest and sincere he was, and that he really, really meant everything he said, and he really does want to save lives. He really does want to know his purpose in life. He really does want everyone's life around him to be better. There's nothing jaded about him. There's no ulterior motives in him. He is just absolutely logistically that guy. And so I think that every time we were trying to pick a take or a performance, it always came down to the most honest performance.
What did you do for yourself to prepare for your first time directing? Well, you made a short, right?
Yeah, I made a short, and I did a series of music videos that were like 4 videos that fit together as one film. So I had those 2 experiences.
Who did you do the videos for?
The Wild Wild Horses.
Oh, okay.
I don't even know if the band's called that anymore. I think they are. I'm not sure. Bands change their names so much these days, I can't keep up. But anyway, so, you know, obviously those 2 things were huge preparation for that. I did an extensive lookbook for this when I first optioned the script that was very detailed in terms of the visual plan and the visual storytelling. And it's actually really fun to go back to the lookbook now, because we really did achieve the ideas that were in that lookbook. It really matches the film that we made.
What were some of those ideas?
One of the things was the way we used color in the lighting. And so I liked this idea that the house was very warm and almost like dripping in yellow, because there's like a nostalgia and a coziness. It's Ned's safe place. It's where he feels the most protected and safe. And that the outside world would be a little bit more blue. And so anytime we're in the outside world, the light it does lean a little more blue, and when you're inside, it leans more yellow. And then there's times where the outside is sort of threatening the inside. Like the best example I can give is in the Thanksgiving dinner scene. You know, they're sitting at that table, and they're very yellow in their light in the house, but this blue light is streaming in from the outside. And it's the first time Tally is joining the family for dinner, so it's like the outside threatening the inside in some way. So there was this sort of subtle hint of the color telling that story a little bit, you know? So we leaned into that every time we were dealing with outside versus inside, or mixing the outside and the inside. You know, all the typewriter stuff and the blue note cards and the texture of the things on his walls and the wood-paneled walls in the basement, and all of those things you can see, you know, those little pieces you can see in the lookbook from the very start.
Well, it really, for lack of a better expression, ties the movie together. Like I was saying at the top of this, oftentimes it doesn't feel like there is an overall vision when you see small films, and it really feels like there was an overall vision going into this.
Yeah.
I also love, and you can talk about maybe playing with the differences of tone here, is the way that other characters respond to him. For instance, the way Exhibit, if he doesn't mind me calling him that, talks to him in the office, and the way that Ed O'Neill talks about him when he's revealing to Melissa Benoist like what he actually is, how you actually didn't pull any punches there, but at the same time we don't get the sense that anyone's a villain or anybody means anything nasty about him.
No, I think, you know,
It's really a tightrope that you're walking.
Everyone in this movie is just doing their best. They really are. They're people who are flawed, and they all make mistakes in certain ways, but they all have good intentions. And so I think we were always very focused on staying clear on people's good intentions, knowing that sometimes good intentions can still go awry, you know? But as long as the intention was right, then as the audience looking at it, you didn't feel like anyone was being vilified.
How did you go about assembling this pretty impressive cast?
I feel so lucky. I mean, a lot of it is that there were wonderful characters on the page, and that always makes a huge difference when you're reaching out to great actors. I also chose to shoot the movie in Los Angeles because I feel like you'll get better actors if they can sleep in their own beds at night. Which is true. And so there were those two elements, but also I had a great casting director, Tamara Nutcut. It was super helpful. My agents at the time were super helpful. Michael signed on first. He really loved the role and really wanted to do it, which was great for us. And then Allison and Ed were next. And really, Allison was just incredible because she personally responded to the story and to the characters so strongly that it was a very quick yes. Which was super helpful, because if you have someone like Allison betting on you and saying that they're going to trust you, then it really helps to get everybody else to trust you.
And if you sign Allison and then go to Ed O'Neill and be like, you'll be playing opposite Allison Janney, I'd imagine you'd be like, yeah, I'm down.
It's definitely helpful, yeah.
And Melissa Benoist, who's wonderful as well. Her turning point in the movie, trying to be cagey about this and not give anything away for people who haven't seen it, but her turning point in the movie is sort of is beautifully acted, and also I really love that pushing on her and the quick cuts of her realization there.
That was a tough scene to cut. That was probably the hardest scene to edit in the whole movie, because most scenes that reveal something in a movie, you know, when you think of the great reveal scenes like Usual Suspects and things like that, the audience is learning that information as you're revealing it to them.
It's only her learning the information in this. The audience already knows, so it's kind of a get in and get out.
Yeah, so what was tricky about that scene was that the scene couldn't be about revealing the information to the audience. This scene had to be about giving the audience the experience of what she was feeling. And so it was very, very delicate to figure out which images next to each other at what moments would give you that sort of feeling of having your breath taken away and feeling like you were gut punched a little bit. And so it took a long time to find that exact right combination to really give the audience a chance to feel what she was feeling in that moment.
Was that something that you were aware of going into shooting it, or was that something that when you got into the edit, you were like, oh, wait a second, this is the thing now?
It was a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I was concerned, but not as concerned as I should have been going into it.
Any director who says they knew everything going into the shoot is either the Coen brothers or wrong.
Right.
Like, it's not...
It's really amazing because, you know, this is a very literary script, and I love reading. I'm an avid reader, and so you imagine the world a certain way when you read, and that affords you a certain creativity that you lose when you actually visually put something on the screen. When you commit to an actual visual image, it changes your experience with something. And I think that is what was hard to anticipate as a first-time director, is like, okay, I pictured it one way in my mind, not to say that we didn't accomplish a version of the film that I imagined, but things just add up differently visually than they do in words.
Oh, you're talking about the rough cut. You're talking about viewing your assembly cut for the first time, aren't you?
Those always make me want to throw up.
I can hear a little bit of the PTSD going on in there.
Yeah, totally.
If you don't mind, take me through that. It's a story that I love about filmmaking because I think for other filmmakers out there, and even for myself sometimes when I've made stuff, it's really good to know from other filmmakers that feeling upon viewing your rough cut is totally normal.
Yes, yeah.
The feeling of wanting to hang yourself, really.
Yeah, and I read so many interviews with the Coen brothers or Wes Anderson or Scorsese, all these people saying that this is the case. And even though all my heroes said this was the case, I still was like, it's over, my life is over. You know?
And it doesn't matter that there's 10 people maybe sitting around you going, no, it's the rough cut, don't worry, it's gonna be good. You're like, nope, everyone's wrong.
Right, and at the same time, you have this amazing creative team assembled, and it's your job to keep everybody enthusiastic. So I can't come out of the rough assembly and be like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. I have to go to the editor and go like, all the pieces are there. Everything we need, we're gonna be good. We're gonna be okay. And you do have to see the potential, and you have to sort of see. It's like, I think, looking at the block of marble before you've sculpted the sculpture. You have to be able to see the sculpture enough to be able to keep the creative team excited and like, working beside you to make that sculpture.
Well, it's just that you can't necessarily see all of the possibilities that are going to arise in the next process.
Yeah.
Something feels kind of done, but you know it's not done, but you can't exactly see what you have to do and how you can fix it until that process starts happening.
Yeah.
So you're left in it's this weird moment where you're just like,
Yeah.
exactly.
It really just feel like throwing up. That's the feeling.
How long have you wanted to direct?
Well, I don't know exactly when I decided I wanted to direct films started, but I started directing theater pretty young. I directed some theater in high school. I directed some theater in college. Directed a couple small productions in Los Angeles when I first moved out there. And so the idea of telling the bigger story and being a part of that was definitely in my mind. And then the more I spent time on sets, and I've spent most of my life on sets, doing 300 episodes of television and 20 plus films and all these things, you just start to pick up different things. You start to ask questions. I started to really use all of the crew members and the incredible creative teams that I was surrounded by as resources, and started asking tons of questions and looking things up and then asking questions, watching like Scorsese's student short film and coming to set and being like, hey, Mr. Cinematographer, so that scene where he did this thing, how did they do that? Like sort of using those people as resources to learn.
Were you inspired by like the early shorts of Scorsese? And I ask that because when I've gone back and watched the early shorts of Scorsese or Spielberg, I've been like, they had it at like 17. And with Spielberg, it's like 9. There's those films, those war films that he made at 9 years old where you're just like, he had it. Like it was already there. This is insane.
It's nuts. I mean, when you watch, it's Scorsese's student film. I think it's called like "Don't Come Knocking," "Don't Come Knocking on My Door" or something like something about not
with
knocking.
Keitel and
and like Harvey Keitel like famously answered an ad in the newspaper to like show up for the casting for that or something, which was amazing. And he was shooting on ends of film. With very little time. These actors were giving these incredible performances that were uncut performances, where it's like these long takes that were uninterrupted until he'd run out of an end of a film, and then he had to have a creative shot and then come back to that shot, But it was just always in him. I mean, he was just like a child, basically, doing that, and it was so innovative and incredible and still inspiring.
Well, he's so good at, no matter what film that he's making, no matter how serious or whatever it is, he's so good at being a consummate entertainer with his edits, with his performances, with the story. It really is all about like how entertaining is this moment and how entertaining is this cut and fun is it. You find that in all of his movies.
And you see in those guys too, it's like, they break all the rules if there's rules, It's like you kind of, maybe it's lucky that I didn't actually go to film school because I don't have those rules drilled into me the way someone else does. I'm just looking at all the films I love and responded to, and those guys were all the rule breakers of the time, and it's like, you look at like the editing of Easy Rider, and it's just like, no one was doing anything like that before that, and suddenly you've got this film where it's like jumping forward and jumping back and jumping forward and jumping back, and it's giving you this sort of like pacey heartbeat and all this stuff, and you're like, wow, these people are really...
Yeah, I remember being 15 and the shot in Easy Rider where he's looking up at the roof of like some shack, and it does like a quick smash cut of the sun and his face, and another scene and a smash cut of the sun again. Being like 15 and being like, what? Like
totally.
Throwing out like, you can't do that.
Yeah, I mean that movie like changed my life because I realized that I didn't have to follow all the rules, and that movie was actually part of why I had the idea to jump to that moment of Ned saying, "I'll save you." I know this doesn't mean anything to the people who haven't seen the movie yet, sorry, but the moment when he's in the kitchen with his mom and she's talking about, I always wanted to be an EMT, and he goes, get the certification, and they're having this sort of very simple, straightforward conversation. And in the moment where she realizes he's right, that it really is that simple, there's this little cut to him as a child looking at her dressed as a fireman going, I'll save you. And part of the reason I thought to cut in a piece of footage that had nothing to do with the scene, but what she was feeling, was from my experience of watching Easy Rider. And that became a little bit of a theme through the project where you have that moment in his early dream, you have that moment where she realizes, oh, he might save me. And then you actually have that moment a third time in that end montage before everything starts to come together at the end. I used the same sort of thought process when I was cutting the scene that I said was so tricky with Tally, really figuring out when to go forward and back in the thought process of pulling those images. So yeah, I mean, you never know where you're going to get inspiration from these things.
Well, what you do, I think, in that scene where you cut back with Tally is you only cut to something about him, like once or twice. I believe the other two cuts are of her when she should have been realizing something.
Right.
Which is a very smart way of maintaining that it's about her and not about us learning about him.
Yeah, it was jumping back into her the moment she chose to see it a certain way.
Yeah. And how did you... how long did it take you to figure that scene out? And
I don't know. I mean, that scene really freaked me out for a long time. I remember it was pretty far into the cuts. I mean, everything else was falling into place, and it was like a placeholder for a long time. And there was a version of that scene that was always there.
It's so crazy when you figure stuff like that out, because figuring it out doesn't mean like a math problem. It's literally like you're somewhere and you go,
yeah,
that's it.
That's exactly
and then it's like, what if that didn't happen?
I don't know.
What if that's it didn't happen?
It's terrifying. I know. I just remember because I was at Caviar, which was one of the sort of producing entities, and I was screening it with the DP, who's Michael Eldon Lloyd, who obviously did an amazing job on this, and he was super supportive through the whole creative process. I remember I was sitting with him, so it had to have had something to do. There was a reason he needed to rewatch the film for something, and it was maybe, I don't know. I think there was 23 full cuts of the film, so we were probably around cut 17, I don't know. And I went, oh my God, what if, And I looked at him, I was like, is that crazy? And he's like, no, I think you should try it, So I do remember where I was sitting when I had the aha moment. I just don't remember how far along in the process it was.
You talk about breaking rules and watching all these other filmmakers break rules, but did you find at points while you were making this, when you went to break a rule every now and then, it would be like, no, we need that rule here?
Yeah, well, I really believe in rules of your world. Like, I believe in rules of your universe, and I'm very committed to that. But in terms of, you have to have traditional coverage, or you can never cross the line, or every scene, if it's in movement, has to stay in movement. It's just things like that, where it's like there's sort of these set ideas of traditional filmmaking, and for me, the rule is, if you break a rule, there should be a reason, that you should really be saying something. It shouldn't just be sloppy.
You can break rules in editing sometimes, because that's where you often have stuff to fall back on. But it's when you break too many rules while shooting, that someone has to kind of be like, you're gonna need some of this.
Yeah. Unless you give yourself options, but yeah.
Let's get some questions from our audience. Who's a question? Right there. Oh, 1 second. We'll get to you in just a second. Go ahead.
Hi. So since you've now done both directing film and a television series, which one do you prefer? Or
are you referring to Fabled?
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything's different. I mean, there's obviously reasons to love things for different reasons. I really believe in the message of Fabled, and I felt my heart is very strongly aligned with the ideas that are in that series. But the difference for me is that this was really my baby. This is really something that I had control over every decision, and that's a good and a bad thing. I mean, the good of that is I get to have control over every decision, and the bad thing is there's nowhere to hide if I've made a bad decision. It's like I'm really held responsible for everything. With Fabled, like I said, as much as I love the storytelling and I love the script, I was really realizing someone else's vision. You know, Zasha Mamet and her husband, Evan Jonikite, really developed that project. And they were the ones who brought it to Refinery 29. And they asked me to come on just as a director. So it was the first time I was doing something where I wasn't producing, I wasn't partially financing. I really had no control in the end decision making. And I really had to help bring someone else's ideas, you know, bring my own ideas to the table as well. But I had to realize someone else's vision. So for me, there's a little bit of a stop and start to that. That's a little bit harder for me to do, or a little bit less comfortable for me to do compared to a project like Sundogs, where it really is, you know, my baby. And at the end of the day, I'm going to take all of the collaborative effort, input that I can take, but I can end up making the end decision if I need to. So, Sundogs.
Did you?
That was a really long way to say that.
Did you partially fund this?
My production company, yeah.
Okay.
So that was kind of partly how all the financing came together early on. So I started Apartment 3C a little bit after I did my first short film.
Named after?
The apartment I lived in with my girlfriends in college. I just felt like if I was going to look at letterhead for the rest of my life, I wanted it to make me smile. I just had the best time living with these girls, and it was such a good year in my life. And so, yeah, so it's Apartment 3C. I was in Lakeshore Tower, right on Lakeshore Drive in Chicago, because I went to Loyola in Chicago. Anyway, so that's Apartment 3C.
Did you do theater in Chicago as
I
well?
did, yeah. So anyway, I formed my own production company, and I had some money behind the production company, but I obviously didn't want to finance it by myself. It's kind of an insane risk to take. So I actually partnered with Bert Hemelick at Caviar Entertainment, and they basically said, we'll sort of match what your company's putting in, and I also feel like there's a financier that we have a relationship with that we think would really believe in this project and respond to the message, and that was Gaston Pavlovich, who did end up coming on board once I pitched it to him. He had just financed Silence, like entirely, which is incredible.
He was like, you can have a little money.
He just financed a $100 million movie, and I was like, can I have $1 million?
Can we also say, not just a $100 million movie, Silence.
Yeah.
Which is like,
I know.
That's kind of, to a degree, that's sort of like, sure, I'll set this money on fire for your movie.
I think he really believes in Scorsese.
Well, I love Silence.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, you know, we talked about Scorsese, and I love Scorsese, but like, when I remember watching Silence and be like, I cannot believe they let him make this. This is incredible.
That was a passion project for a long time for him. He's been trying to make that for like 20 years, I feel like, maybe longer. I say that like I know him. I just read about him all the time.
No, say.
I don't know him at all.
Yeah, Marty was saying in an interview that I read.
Yeah, this is one of the 18,000 interviews I've read. I'm totally a stalker. But anyway, and then he just also did The Irishman.
Apparently it's like, has ballooned from its original budget to like double at this point. Like it's got De Niro, Pesci, Keitel, I think. Like, you know.
Well, all I know is that I got this guy's money back. I sold the movie and I got all his money back for Sundogs. So he's happy with me.
Good. Sorry, yeah. You did your
I did my part.
Yeah, he's like, she's good. She's fine.
We're in the black.
I've been really lucky to follow your career for almost 15 years now, so I've gotten to watch pretty much everything that you've done. But I wanted to know how your acting influenced your decision-making in directing, and how directing going forward is going to influence your acting.
Yeah, they both influence each other, inexplicably and inevitably. Being on so many sets just makes me so comfortable on a set, and that really gives me an advantage. I never really thought about until I was directing how many first-time directors I'd worked with as an actor who had really maybe never been on a set before. And you look at the director thinking, they know everything and they have the answers to everything, and some of these guys had just literally barely spent any time on sets. So there was a huge advantage for me in the sense of how comfortable I am on a set. I've lived on sets most of my life. You just kind of understand the workings and the flow of everything, and all the ups and downs and ins and outs, and
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
You also get a sense, I think, on television doing, how many episodes of television did you say?
Like 300-ish.
300 episodes. That's probably working with about 150 different directors at the very least. So you get a sense of what the actors respond to and what actors don't respond to.
Absolutely, yeah. And I know like how I would want someone to help me in the process as an actor. So I try to look at it knowing that every actor needs something different, and I try to be as sensitive and open to that. And I think I'm aware of that from having been an actor for so long. And then in terms of it affecting me as an actor, I definitely am just in the process differently. I know every step of the process on a whole different level. You know, I understand what the wardrobe department's going through. I understand what the dit tent is going through. I understand what the cinematographer needs in any given moment. I know that, you know, and every actor should know this, you should stand on your mark for at least 90 seconds before they say action. And don't talk and don't move because you will look better. It's really true, because, you know, actors are like talking all the way up till the last second, and, you know, all this stuff, and they're moving around and they're not standing, and they're like...
Just trying to focus you.
Yeah, and the cinematographer's been lighting a stand-in who usually looks nothing like you, and they're like hoping it's gonna look great. And if you just stand on your mark for like a minute to 90 seconds, you will look incredible, because they'll run in and they'll do like last-minute little tweaks, and they'll make it work exactly for your face, and you'll look your absolute best. So there's like little tricks like that, but it's also just being in the process differently. I know how to make the day go a little bit faster now as an actor. I know how to facilitate the process differently. And also when I'm acting now, I'm like, oh man, all I gotta do is act? This is great.
Did you ever find that, and I would just be curious, because as we said, like, you know, having done 300 episodes, a bunch of different directors, you learn what you like and what you don't like and what's good and bad coming from a director. But when you start directing, did you ever find yourself doing things that maybe a director that you worked with before you didn't particularly like, and having to go, oh wait, I know that this is my vision, but let me pull it back a little bit?
Well, I mean, gosh, I hope not. I tried to be really aware of it. The thing that I felt like was the hardest was because we shot this movie in 18 days.
Exactly.
With, you know, overtime, and it was so quick. We just didn't have room to play outside of the plan, right? So there was a very clear plan, and oftentimes that plan meant I had to like go to Allison and be like, I need you to stand here, and then I need you to walk here. And I know it's really annoying. We can't like rehearse this in a way where you might have a different feeling, right. Because like we don't have time to light it.
Luckily, it's Allison Janney,
she's phenomenal. She could make anything seem real. But because I was aware that that can be frustrating or can feel limiting as an actor, I was always ahead of it. I tried to always like, you know, go talk to everybody in the trailer in the morning and be like, hey, listen, I know it could be really annoying, but here's the time limitations we have. I tried to just sort of get ahead of those things by giving extra information or explanation of what's going on, so that no one was taken by surprise or no one was frustrated in the moment. And if something really did feel wrong and we needed to adjust something, then we would. But we knew that it was like a real deal if that came up. It wasn't just someone kind of having a flippant moment, you know?
Right. Next question. I think this is our last question. Who's got a microphone? Oh, right there. Sorry.
Hi, Jen. I have to read because I'm so nervous. Okay, so what was the most important lesson you had to learn that has a positive effect on your film? How did that lesson happen?
Important lesson. I don't know. I mean, there's a million things that you learn when you do this. I would say to my parents, I haven't had a growth spurt like this since I learned to walk. You know, it's, and I'm not exaggerating. You would wake up in the morning and you have no idea what challenges you're going to face because you've never done it before. You know, I kind of naively thought that it was going to feel like, that a feature would feel like a really long short film. And it doesn't. It's like a whole other beast. So, you know, I never quite knew exactly what challenges I was going to face in any given moment. I grew daily learning how to manage those problems. And I think ultimately, probably the thing that I learned that I'll take with me through every job or every film that I direct is that that everybody's coming in a little bit scared. You know, that it's not just me. It's, you know, the producers or the financiers or the actors that day, or, you know, everyone in the position that they're in. No one wants to be in trouble. No one wants to get fired. Everybody wants to do great work. And you have all these highly sensitive, highly creative people that the reason they're so good at what they do is because they're highly sensitive and highly creative. And oftentimes you hear about these toxic environments on set where people are getting into arguments or they're in conflicts. And it's because they're highly sensitive and highly creative. So I just made a decision really early on, to take nothing personally, and just look at the person and know you're afraid of something or you're worried about something. And so I would just look at them and say, what's this really about and how can I help? And it would change the whole dynamic of the conversation. We almost never had a conflict ever on set, because instead of them feeling like they were up against something, or maybe I was going to be in conflict with them, I was always like, how can I help? Great. How can I make your job easier? You know? So I think by making that decision to not take anything personally, instead of going like, why would they bring this to me? Or why are they, you're under all this stress and you're overtired and all these things, it could be really easy to take something the wrong way. Just always taking that breath and saying, okay, they're bringing this to me because they care. And then kind of trying to go from there. So I would say that was probably the greatest lesson that I learned early on in this process that I really hope to take with me through my career.
I think that's also the greatest lesson that anybody can give when it comes to working with actors, because I think more so than anybody on set, actors feel like they're up against something. And it's just the natural part of the job.
Yeah.
Because you have a certain amount of time, you have to convince yourself of something, you have to get yourself there. If you don't feel like you're getting to it, you suddenly feel really backed into a corner. And if your director isn't there to just be like, how can I help you, but is pushing you further into a corner, that's when the explosions happen.
Yeah, and
I always say
so
rightfully.
Vulnerable. It really is so vulnerable. People don't. If you've never acted before, if you've never been put on the spot in front of a group of people, especially peers on a set like that, where you really feel this pressure to deliver and the time crunch, there's no way to explain how exposed you feel in that moment, and to really approach it with that perspective of knowing that someone's basically standing there naked before you, and all they want is to do their best. That's usually the most empathetic way to find a solution.
Congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
It's on Netflix now, right?
Yes, press play on Netflix.
Sundogs. It's a wonderful film. Congratulations. Everybody give Jennifer a round of applause.
Guys.